I was standing barefoot in the kitchen of my beach villa when my phone lit up, again. The same notification pulsed across the screen like a warning I could not outrun. Missed call. Dad. The counter blinked at me from the top corner. 42. I remember thinking that was more calls than he had given me during the entire years of my life combined. Outside the sliding doors, the Gulf breeze pressed against the glass and the soft sound of waves rolled in steady and slow, the kind of sound that usually soothed me. That morning, it only made the silence inside the house feel sharper. I should tell you before we go any further that the moment those calls came, and I was holding a mug of coffee I had not even tasted, I was staring at my own reflection in the glass door, trying to understand how everything with my family had collapsed so quickly. And if you are listening right now, I am a little curious about you too. What are you doing while taking in this story? Walking. Folding laundry. Greetings in your favorite chair. I ask because when all of this happened, I was standing in this kitchen just like now, waiting for a Christmas that was supposed to be different. The screen brightened again, and I turned the phone face down on the counter because I could not stand to see his name one more time. The world outside my window looked warm and golden, but inside my chest, something heavy was sinking. I leaned on the counter and felt the cool stone under my palms. I kept replaying everything in my head. The text that started it all, the way the words landed, the way I stared at the message until my eyes burned. For some reason, it began with me wanting something simple. I had texted Dad a week earlier asking what he wanted for Christmas. I always asked, even though every year he brushed me off or told me not to spend money, or redirected the conversation back to my sister Shannon and her perfect little family. That morning I wanted to try again. Maybe foolish hope is a habit that dies slow. He replied with one line, "This year is just a real family." That was it. No explanation, no apology, not even my name. I was shocked, but replied back, "No problem." I read it while standing in my bedroom in Tampa Bay with the morning sun hitting the hardwood floor. I remember that warm light on my feet because the words felt the exact opposite. Cold, dismissing, like a door being shut without warning. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the phone so long that the screen dimmed and went black. That one sentence pushed something loose inside me that had been holding on for years. I looked around my room at the suitcases I had already pulled out and the stack of gifts I had wrapped for my niece and nephew. I had booked my flight home weeks earlier. I always went home, even when it felt like I was walking into a house where no one saved a seat for me. Even when my mom made comments about how far away I lived. Even when Dad called me his complicated kid, as if that explained why I did not quite belong. After reading that text, I canceled my flight right there on the edge of my bed. Not out of anger, more out of a quiet realization that I had been trying too hard for too long. My whole life had been some version of me standing on the outside of my own family, hoping they might notice I was still there. The villa had become a symbol of the life I built to survive that feeling. I had bought it only a few months earlier. A $2 million place with light wood floors and long windows that caught every shade of sunset. I bought it after years of grinding inside a tiny software startup in Austin. I was one of the early engineers who stuck through every long night, every pivot, every year when the salaries came late but the dreams stayed loud. When the company finally sold for $200 million, I walked away with a little over $7 million, enough for me to breathe for the first time in my life. But even after that milestone, I never told my family more than the basics. They never asked. They never wanted details about my work. They barely understood what I did for a living. Shannon was the one they bragged about, the golden one, the dependable one, the one who had given them grandchildren. I was the daughter who had drifted too far west and chosen a life they did not understand. So I built my own, and I chose Florida because when you grow up in a place like Vermont where winters stretch like long gray monologues, you start daydreaming about warmth, about air that does not sting your skin, about waking up to birds instead of the sound of your neighbor scraping ice from a windshield. When I first walked into this villa, the air smelled faintly of salt and citrus, and the realtor kept talking about square footage, but all I saw was space to breathe. Space that felt like a life I could claim without apology. I wrote the check and closed the door behind me that afternoon, knowing this place would hold both the future I was choosing and the past I was trying to outgrow. And that brings me back to that morning in the kitchen, the morning when the phone would not stop ringing, because the people who once made me feel like a leftover had suddenly decided they needed me, or wanted something from me, or cared about appearances more than truth. I reached for the phone again, not to answer, only to look. The missed calls had climbed from 42 to 43. The red number pulsed once before the screen dimmed. I held it for a moment and pressed it against my chest, not as comfort, but to ground myself. For the first time in my life, I was not the one chasing a place at the table. They were the ones reaching for me, and I had no idea yet how far this storm was going to travel. I only knew one thing. The message that started all of this had cracked something open that was never going to close the same way again. I walked to the window and looked out at the shoreline just as the sun edged higher. The water shimmered like something alive and steady. A part of me wondered if peace always came with this kind of quiet warning before everything changed. I stayed there for a long moment with the phone in my hand, listening to the waves and trying to steady my breath, knowing deep down that whatever came next was going to pull me back to a place I thought I had already outrun. Because to understand why that one little text broke me the way it did, you would have to see where I came from. You would have to walk back with me into a house in northern Vermont where winter lasted half the year, and the cold was not just outside the windows. It sat at our kitchen table. It rode in the car on the way to church. It tucked me in at night more faithfully than either of my parents ever did. Our town was small enough that everybody knew who belonged to whom. People knew me as Carl and Linda Blake's younger daughter. Most of them did not even remember my first name. They remembered my sister, though. Shannon with the shiny hair and the easy smile and the report cards that my mom kept in a plastic folder, like holy documents. From the outside, we looked like one of those families people put on Christmas. Cards. A 2-story house with green shutters, a little porch that Mom decorated every December with a wreath and a string of white lights. Dad sang in the choir at our little white church, Shannon in every school play and every yearbook committee photo, me walking 2 steps behind them in my 2 big boots, trying not to slip on the ice. Inside the house, it felt different. When I think of childhood, the first sound that comes to mind is not laughter. It is the furnace kicking on in the middle of the night, rattling and sighing like it was just as tired of holding everything together as I was. I figured out pretty early that in our family, attention was a limited resource, and Shannon had called dibs on it before I even got here. She did not do it to be cruel. It was simply the air she breathed. Teachers loved her. Boys followed her around by sophomore year. Church ladies pinched her cheeks when she sang solos and told Mom that she must be so proud. They were proud. They said it out loud. They wore it like a winter coat buttoned up to the chin. My memories of my own small victories are quieter. In 5th grade, I won first place at the county science fair for a project about solar energy. My teacher made a big fuss and gave me a special pin to wear on my sweater. At the awards assembly, I kept scanning the bleachers for my parents. But only Mom showed up. She sat in the back, checked her watch a lot, and left right after Shannon texted that she needed a ride home from choir practice. Afterward, in the car, I held the little trophy in my lap and told her about how the judges said my project was impressive. She smiled and said that was nice, then spent the rest of the drive talking about how busy they were getting, ready for Shannon's big recital. David's favorite story to tell people was how Shannon had been singing before. She could talk properly. Mine was how I took apart an old radio when I was 10, just to see how it was, worked, and put it back together again. To this day, I do not know if anyone in my family even noticed the radio had stopped crackling for a few hours that afternoon. Christmas was the worst of it. If I close my eyes, I can still smell the pine and cinnamon, and hear the same. Old carols on the stereo. Dad sat in his recliner with a mug of coffee and watched Shannon pass out the gifts, making sure everyone saw the big ones with her name on them. Mom fluttered around with a trash bag collecting wrapping paper. I sat on the floor, half in the circle and half out of it. I used to pour my whole heart into the things I made for them. One year, I spent weeks knitting Dad a scarf from leftover yarn an elderly wed neighbor had given me. The stitches were crooked, but it was the longest thing I had ever made. Every loop felt like a little piece of my hope. I wrapped it in plain paper and wrote his name on it in careful block letters. He opened it between a new set of golf clubs from Mom and a leather wallet from Shannon. He pulled it out, held it up, and laughed a little. Then he wrapped it once around his neck, said, "Thanks, kiddo," and went right back to admiring the clubs. The scarf ended up on the back of a dining chair and then in the hall closet. By New Year's, I never saw it again. That was the year I stopped making handmade gifts. It was not that they were mean to me. They fed me, they clothed me. On the surface, it all looked fine. But there is a kind of neglect that happens while everyone smiles for pictures. They ask how school is, but do not wait for the answer. They tell you they love you, but do not see you. You become the extra place setting at the table. There if needed, easy to forget when not. Shannon and I shared a room until she left for college. Her side was covered with posters and photographs and ribbons. Mine had one small bookshelf and a desk shoved under the window. On winter nights, I would sit there with a second-hand computer that Dad's friend from work had given us when his office upgraded. The fan whirred so loud that Shannon complained she could not hear the television in the living room. I wore headphones and taught myself basic coding from library books while the snow piled up outside. Sometimes I would get excited about making a little program work and carry my laptop into the kitchen to show Dad. He would look for a second, nod, and change the subject to Shannon's latest scholarship offer. At some point, I stopped trying to show him anything. I tucked my pride into the same place I had stuffed all those old Christmas cards. By the time I was in high school, everyone in town knew that Shannon would go somewhere special. She did. A nice private college in New York State that Dad talked about every time. Someone asked how the family was doing. When people asked about me, he would say that I was still figuring it out. He never said it unkindly, but it stung more than any sharp word could have. Senior year, my guidance counselor pulled me aside and told me quietly that my grades and test scores could get me into a good engineering program out of state. She slid a brochure across her desk with a campus in Texas printed on the front, all palm trees and blue sky. I traced the outlines of those trees with my finger, like someone touching another life. When I told my parents about that offer, Mom frowned. "Texas is so far," she said. "Why not stay closer? Maybe UVM or community college for a bit." Dad shrugged and said that not everybody had to leave home to be happy. Shannon had settled at that fancy college just a day's drive away, and they were satisfied with that. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, wincing at the hot water on my hands as I washed dishes, and thinking that if I stayed, I would disappear completely. Maybe some girls are built to bloom in one small town. I knew I was not one of them. I chose the school in Texas. I signed the papers, accepted the scholarship, and when Dad told me he did not understand why I wanted to run so far, I just smiled and told him I wanted to see what warm weather felt like at Christmas. Back then, I could not have known that one day I would be living in a house where palm trees really did sway outside my windows in December. I only knew that Vermont felt like a coat that no longer fit, and no one was going to help me take it off. The night before I left for college, I sat on the front steps with my suitcase packed beside me, looking out at the streetlights glowing on the quiet road. Shannon had already driven back to New York. Mom was inside folding laundry. Dad was in his chair watching some late ball game, the sound drifting through the screen door behind me. I looked up at the black sky and made a private promise that I did not say out loud. One day I would build a life where I did not have to beg to be seen. One day I would have a home that felt warm all the way through, not just on the thermostat. What I did not know then was that even after you leave the house you grew up in, its voice follows you. It shows up in the way you overwork, in the way you flinch when your phone buzzes with a message from family. It waits for quiet mornings years later, in a kitchen far from that old porch, and it still knows how to push your buttons with 4 little words. This year is just a real family. I walked back inside the villa with my phone still warm in my hand. The tide had shifted outside, but something inside me felt even more unsteady. I tried to shake it off as I stepped into the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of lemons from the cleaning spray I had used earlier. The quiet felt heavier than usual, as if the walls knew what was coming long before I did. I opened the fridge, stared at a carton of eggs I was not hungry for, then closed it again. My mind kept replaying the curt message from Dad. The words, "You are not part of the real family this year," sat somewhere between my chest and my stomach, like a stone that would not move. I pulled out a chair at the small dining table and sat down, rubbing the tension between my eyebrows with 2 fingers. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Valerie, my aunt on my mom's side, the one person in the entire family who had never once made me feel like an outsider. "Are you doing okay, kiddo?" I typed back slowly. "I just need a second. Dad said only real family this year." Her reply came almost instantly. "That man forgets who raised him. You come spend Christmas with us in Maine if you want. We got plenty of room." I smiled at the screen, but my throat tightened instead of easing. I did want that comfort. Her warm kitchen and cedar-scented house, her easy way of looking at me that never carried disappointment. But I had spent years telling myself that one day Dad would see me for who I was. I had wanted this Christmas to be that day. I pushed my chair back and walked to the living room. The villa was bright, even at night, with soft lights tucked into corners and the wide windows catching reflections of the ocean. This place still felt unreal to me. My own villa was bought with my own money after more than a decade of scraping, buy in tech. Long, lonely hours at my desk, long nights debugging code until my eyes burned. Every small promotion, every ignored call from home whenever I wanted to share good news, all of it had led me here. I sank down onto the couch and let my head fall back. The sound of the surf drifted through the sliding doors. It usually calmed me. Tonight, it only made the place feel bigger, emptier. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rebecca, my old roommate from Seattle, and one of my closest friends. She almost never texted at night, unless something was wrong. "Saw your message earlier. You sound off. Wanna talk?" I called her. She picked up before the first ring finished. "Hey, what happened?" Her voice was warm and steady. I felt myself loosen just a little. "David said he only wants a real family for Christmas. I said I wanted to surprise him with something, and he just shut the door." There was a long breath on her side. "That stings. I am sorry, honey." I stared at a spot on the ceiling until it blurred. I bought this villa thinking I could finally invite them somewhere nice. I thought it would matter. I was even trying to figure out what Dad really likes so I could get him a gift that did not feel like something from a gas station rack. I do not know why I bothered. You bothered because you are still trying to heal something that was never yours to carry. Her voice softened. You have done everything right. Sometimes parents do not see the grown-up in front of them. They only see the kid they built in their heads. I let her words sink in. They stung, but in a different way. A clarifying way. I guess I just wanted one holiday where I did not have to pretend I was fine with being the extra. Rebecca made a small sound of understanding. Then do not pretend. Not this time. Come spend it with people who want you. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. The idea warmed me, but there was something inside me that pushed back. I do not want to run. I want to stand still for once. Rebecca paused. Then stand here, in this villa. Make it yours. Invite your people. You are not alone, Marissa. You have more family than the ones who share your last name. I swallowed hard. Her words settled somewhere deep. Maybe you are right. I stayed on the phone with her for a few more minutes while she told me about the first heavy snow in Seattle and her husband trying to fix their old furnace with YouTube videos. I laughed once or twice. Then we said goodnight. The villa was quiet again. I got up and walked down the hall. When I pushed open the door to the guest room across from mine, I stood there for a moment. I had not decorated it much yet. Only a soft cotton throw on the bed and a tall lamp in the corner. But suddenly, I could picture Valerie there. I could picture Rebecca and her husband on the couch watching some silly Christmas movie. I could picture cousins who had never judged me, friends from work who were planning to spend the holidays alone, the people who had shown up for me over the years in ways my own parents never quite managed. The thought surprised me. It was like someone had opened a window in my chest. I walked back to the living room and sat at the coffee table. My laptop was still open from earlier. I clicked on the calendar app. The dates for Christmas week glowed back at me. I tapped one finger against the table. An idea was forming. Not quite a plan, but something close, something sharp and warm at the same time. I closed the laptop slowly and set it aside. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. I needed to decide whether I was about to flee from the pain or walk straight through it. Outside, the wind shifted, and a palm branch tapped lightly against the window. It made me look toward the shoreline again. The beach was empty, except for a single set of footprints near the water. Mine. A thin line of proof that I had been here, that I existed, that I belonged somewhere in this world. I sat very still, letting that settle in me. My phone lit up again on the coffee table. I stared at it for a long moment before lifting it. Valerie again. Call me if you need. I am awake. I typed back. Not yet, but soon. Then I set the phone face down and looked around the villa once more. The air felt different. Less like a hiding place, more like a beginning. I stood up and walked toward the glass doors, pressed my palm to the cool surface. The ocean dark and endless beyond it. For the first time since Dad's message, I felt something close to clarity taking shape. Whatever happened next, I was not going to shrink myself to fit into anyone's idea of a real family. The only question left was what I was going to build in place of the old, patterns I had finally grown tired of carrying. I took a slow breath, knowing I was right on the edge of something larger than bruised feelings or one hurtful text. And that was exactly the moment a new message flashed across my phone screen, bright in the dim room, pulling my breath short again. It was from Valerie. She had sent only a few words. Checking on you. You sounded shaky earlier. I stared at the little gray text bubble for a long moment. Then I did something I had not done in a long time. I called her without overthinking it. She picked up on the second ring, breathless, like she had hurried to the phone. There she is, my favorite niece, Valerie said. That familiar warmth already softening something tight in my chest. Tell me what your dad did now. I laughed once, a short, tired sound. I told her about the message, how I had reached out about Christmas, and how he had answered with that line about real family. How it was not the first time he had iced me out, but somehow this time it landed differently. Valerie did not interrupt. I could hear a television murmuring low in the background and the faint clink of dishes. She was probably standing in her little kitchen up in Bangor, one hand on her hip, shaking her head. When I finished, she let out a long breath. That man was stubborn at 8 years old, and he never changed, she said. But let me say this, Marissa. Blood does not always know how to act like family. Sometimes the people who show up are not the ones on your family tree. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. I hate that it still hurts this much, I said. I am grown. I have a good job, a roof, and money in the bank, but one text from him, and I feel 10 years old again. That is because you never got what you should have gotten from him, she said softly. When a dad does not see you, that wound stays tender. There was a pause, and then she added, You know you are welcome here for Christmas. Me and Dennis would love to have you. I will make that chocolate pie you like. I smiled. I could almost smell her kitchen through the phone. Butter, sugar, the faint scent of wood smoke from the stove. I know, I said. And I might still take you up on that someday. But right now, I am sitting in this big house in Florida, and I keep thinking about all the people who have actually been there for me. And I am starting to wonder why I have never tried to put them in the same room. Valerie was quiet for a second. Then she laughed, a warm, surprised sound. Now that, she said, sounds like an idea. We stayed on the phone while I walked through the villa, my bare feet whispering against the floor. I told her how many bedrooms there were, how the guest rooms had their own bathrooms, how the living room opened straight out to the deck and the sand beyond. This place was meant for more than me eating takeout on the couch, I said. Then fill it up, she answered. Invite your real family. The words sat in the air between us. Real family. For the first time, that phrase did not make me flinch. It made me curious. After we hung up, I sat at the dining table with my laptop and a legal pad. Old habit. Whenever life felt too big, I made lists. Lists made chaos feel like something I could hold. At the top of the page, I wrote Christmas, then underlined it. The first name I wrote was Valerie and Dennis. That was easy. They had opened their home to me so many times when I was a kid. When things got tense in my parents' house, Mom would send me up to visit her sister for a weekend. Valerie never made it feel like exile. She made it feel like a sanctuary. Then I added Ellie. Technically, she was my cousin, Valerie's daughter, but she had always felt more like a younger sister. She was the one who would sit with me on the back steps at family reunions when the adults got too loud, whispering jokes to make me laugh. After that, the names came faster. Nina from Atlanta, who had been my roommate my second year in college when I'd first moved to Texas. She was the one who shoved a cupcake into my hands the day my first serious boyfriend dumped me and told me that any man who could not handle a woman with opinions did not deserve dessert. Caleb from Austin, a fellow engineer who had quietly slipped me a check once when our startup went through a rough patch and half the team salaries were delayed. He had just said, "Pay me back when you can," and never mentioned it again. I had paid him back with interest, but the kindness stuck. There was also Grace and Harold, the retired couple who had lived across the hall from me in Seattle for a few years before I moved to Florida. When my car broke down, Harold had driven me to work for a week. When I had the flu so bad I could not stand, Grace had left soup at my door and checked on me every few hours. I looked at the list and felt something loosen in my chest. None of these people shared my last name. None of them had ever sat at my parents' formal dining table, but every one of them had shown up for me when life had gotten messy. I pulled my laptop closer and opened a flight site. My fingers hovered over the keys. For a moment, the old voice came back, the one that sounded suspiciously like my dad. "Who do you think you are, flying people across the country, trying to play hostess in some fancy house?" I shut my eyes and lifted my shoulders, trying to shake that voice off. Then I remembered working until 2 in the morning at 28 years old, staring at screens full of broken code. I remembered living on cheap noodles so my savings could stretch one more month. I remembered the day our little company got that acquisition offer for $200 million, and my boss took me aside. He had told me what my equity was now worth. Just over $7 million. Enough for a comfortable life. Enough to choose something different. I had done that. Not my parents, not Shannon, not anyone else. Me. I opened my eyes and started searching for flights. First, I looked at Bangor to Tampa. Then Atlanta, then Austin, Seattle. The prices made me wince, especially for the holiday week, but not in the old familiar way that tightened my stomach. This time it was more like a practical sting, like pulling off a bandage. It hurt, but it was doable. I started sending messages. To Valerie, I wrote that I wanted her and Dennis and Ellie to come down and spend Christmas on the beach. I told her I would cover flights and a place to stay. To Nina, I said that if she did not already have plans, I would love for her to escape Atlanta traffic and come sit under palm trees with me for a week. To Caleb, I wrote that I knew he usually stayed in town for the holidays, but if he felt like trading cold pizza and video games for ocean air and a real bed, I had room. To Grace and Harold, I kept it simple. I said that their kindness over the years had meant more to me than they knew, and I would be honored if they would let me return the favor with a little sunshine and home-cooked food. Then I put the phone face down and waited. The replies started trickling in faster than I expected. Valerie called me instead of texting. Her voice broke a little when she said that no one had ever flown her anywhere for Christmas in her entire life. Dennis hollered in the background that he was buying a new pair of fishing shorts just for Florida. Hallow squealed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Nina sent a string of messages that all boiled down to yes, and also I am bringing wine. Caleb answered in his dry way that sunshine and a guest room were an upgrade from his usual holiday plans, with frozen dinners and reruns. Grace texted that she and Harold would be delighted, as long as she could spend at least one afternoon in my kitchen showing me how to make her pecan pie properly. I read each message twice. My eyes blurred once or twice, but not from grief this time. It was something else. Something I could not quite name. By the time I closed my laptop that night, There were confirmed flights and arrival times saved in my calendar. In less than 2 weeks, this quiet villa would be full of voices and footsteps, and people who had chosen me without conditions. I stood in the middle of the living room and turned slowly, letting my eyes trace the space that would soon hold them. The couch where Valerie would sit with her feet tucked under her. The corner where Caleb would probably park himself with a book. The stretch of beach where Ellie and Nina would take 1,000 photos. Dad's words about real family echoed faintly in the back of my mind, but they did not land the same way anymore. As I walked toward the guest rooms to start thinking about where everyone would sleep, I felt it clearly for the first time. I was not just reacting to being shut out. I was building something of my own. The old story about where I did and did not belong was still there, but for once, it was not the loudest voice in the room. I woke before the sun, the soft hum of the ceiling fan carrying a little chill across the room. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the slow push of the waves outside the window. The house felt different now, warmer somehow, as if it already knew company was coming. I stretched, rubbed my eyes, and sat up with the quiet thud of my feet touching the cool floor. I had barely made it to the kitchen when my phone buzzed with the first confirmation of the day. A text from Caleb, landing in Tampa at 3 in the afternoon. Will Uber be needed? Then a second message. Do you have sweet tea? I laughed under my breath. I typed back that I would make something fresh before he got here. By 8 in the morning, I had coffee brewing and a small notebook open on the counter. I wrote down arrival times, airport pickups, and the names of the rooms I wanted each person to have. My handwriting grew crooked in the margins, but the list was starting to look like a plan instead of a wild idea. The villa grew brighter as the sun rose. Light spilled across the living room, catching the pale blues of the throw pillows and the warm tan of the sofa. I kept pausing to take in the view, that endless stretch of ocean that still did something soft to my chest every day. The time I looked at it, this place felt like a possibility. Around mid-morning, I stepped out onto the deck to shake the dust off the outdoor cushions. The air was warm and clean. I could smell faint salt lifting from the sand. I was fluffing one of the big pillows when the woman next door walked over to the low fence line. She was holding a grocery bag and wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was barely bright. "You must be the new one," she said without smiling. I straightened and brushed my hands off on my shorts. "Yes, I moved in a few weeks ago." She nodded once. Her tone was clipped. "Just so you know, this community is quiet around the holidays. Comps around here like peace. We do not do loud gatherings or big parties." I blinked. I had not said a word about parties, but something in her voice made my shoulders stiffen. I said I understood. She gave another curt nod and walked away across her patio, her sandals thudding sharply with each step. I watched her go, then looked back at the cushions in my hands. The brightness of the morning dimmed just a little. Inside, I made myself focus on the growing to-do list. Learn the guest bathrooms, stock the fridge, set out extra towels. I moved room to room with a steady rhythm, golden linens and opening windows to let in the ocean air. It felt good to prepare for people who actually wanted to be here. By noon, Valerie called. They were already at the Bangor airport, and Dennis was trying to convince the gate agent that his fishing gear counted as carry-on luggage. I could hear Ellie laughing in the background, and the sound loosened something tight in my chest. "We will see you tonight," Valerie said. "I cannot believe we are spending Christmas in Florida." After we hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room and tried to picture their bags piled by the door, Valerie's voice echoing through the house, Ennis slipping outside to examine the beach, Ellie spinning in the middle of the living room taking pictures for her friends. It felt unreal in the best way. I was setting out clean glasses in the kitchen when another text came in. It was Nina. "Boarding soon. I bought that blackberry wine you like. Do not judge me." I smiled and set the phone aside. Everything was coming together. For once in my life, I felt like the center of something, instead of the leftover part, at the edge of the picture. By early afternoon, I was at the airport picking up Caleb. He walked out of the sliding glass doors wearing a faded t-shirt, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and a half-amused expression. "Well, look at you," he said as he climbed into the passenger seat. "Florida suits you." I rolled my eyes but felt my cheeks warm. We talked the whole drive back, slipping easily into the kind of conversation that did not need effort or performance. When we reached the villa, he whistled low under his breath. "This is where you live. You were being modest." I told him it still felt strange to say out loud. He nodded like he understood. We carried his bag inside. I showed him to the guest room and gave him a few minutes alone while I made the sweet tea I promised. When he came back to the kitchen, he looked lighter, almost rested already. He took a sip and nodded. Good. Real good. We settled into the living room for a bit. Talk about work and old stories from the startup days. I realized how much I had missed being around someone who knew that part of my life. A little after 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I went to the entryway and opened it to see Grace and Harold standing there, with small overnight bags and bright smiles. "You live in heaven," Grace said, stepping inside. "My goodness, look at this place." I hugged them both. Harold took off his cap and wiped his forehead, shaking his head at the size of the living room. "This beats Seattle by a long mile," he said quietly. I helped carry their bags to the guest room with the soft blue bedding and ocean view. Grace whispered that she felt like she had stepped into a magazine. By 4 in the afternoon, the villa started to feel like a home. Vu drifted from the kitchen and the living room. Caleb and Harold were already talking about fishing. Grace was opening cabinets to help me decide where to put the dessert dishes. The warm sounds filled all the empty spaces I had pretended not to notice before. I stepped out to the deck for a moment, letting the door fall softly shut behind me. The air smelled of salt. The waves were steady. For a minute, I felt completely still inside, as if everything had finally fallen into place. That was when my phone buzzed sharply. I glanced at the screen expecting another flight update. Instead, it was a notification. A tag. From Ellie. A photo she had posted. I opened it slowly. In the picture, Caleb was standing on the deck, holding a cold drink, the ocean bright behind him. Grace was in the corner of the frame, smiling at something out of view. The caption said, "Holiday with family." My breath caught. My finger hovered over the screen. There were already comments. "Is that your cousin house? Where is this Florida? Wow." Then one more. From Shannon. "Is Dad there too?" My chest tightened. I stared at the horizon. A low wind brushed against my legs. Somewhere inside the villa, I heard laughter. It felt like it belonged to a world I had just stepped out of. The phone buzzed again. A second notification. Then a third. My name is being mentioned. Someone sharing the picture. A tiny spark of dread lit at the base of my spine. Inside the house, someone called my name, but I stood still on that deck, with the phone buzzing in my hand, the photo burning bright on the screen, sensing that this moment was the one where everything would start shifting again. And I was right, though I did not know how right until the notifications started stacking up on month, my screen like falling snow. At first, it was just the usual thing. A few likes from Ellie's friends, a couple of little hearts from people I did not know. Then I saw my last name in a comment from someone back in Vermont, a woman who had sung with Mom in the church choir since I was a kid. "Blake's in Florida now, I see. It looks beautiful." Another comment popped up under it. "I thought they always did Christmas at home." My chest tightened. It felt like being watched through a keyhole. Then I saw Shannon comment, 4 words that made my stomach flip. "Is Dad there too?" My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, I actually considered answering. Saying no, he is sitting in that same recliner in Vermont, where he has sat every Christmas of my life. Saying he did not invite me to that house this year, say I am not part of what he calls a real family. Instead, I hit the side button, and the phone went dark. Inside, someone called my name again. I slid the door open and stepped back into the living room, slipping the phone into my pocket like contraband. I did not want anyone to see. Grace was at the stove stirring something in a pot, humming softly. Caleb and Harold were on the couch, arguing good-naturedly about which football team had the worst season. The television droned low in the background. The house looked exactly the way I had always imagined a holiday should look. People relaxed, voices layered without cutting. "You all right, honey?" Grace asked when she glanced over her shoulder. "Fine," I said, "just checking something." The lie tasted thin, but she did not push. She just motioned toward the pot. "Taste this gravy. Tell me if it needs more pepper. I let myself sink into the rhythm of the evening. We opened a bottle of wine Nina had carried in when she arrived an hour later, her suitcase still by the door. She hugged me hard enough to make me laugh and held me at arm's length. "Sun looks good on you," she told me. "Atlanta has been nothing but gray." We ate around the big wooden table that had felt too large when I first moved in. Tonight, there were not even enough chairs. Ellie perched on a stool from the kitchen island, thinking through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. Valerie laughed at something Dennis said about Florida bugs. Once or twice, I caught myself leaning back just to listen, trying to memorize the sound. It was not until later, when the dishes were piled in the sink and everyone had drifted off to different corners of the house, that I picked up my phone again. The screen brightened and my breath caught. "Missed calls," it said. Then a number that made my scalp prickle. 18, all from the same contact. Dad. There were voicemails, too. I stared at the little red dots lined up in a neat, accusing row. I carried the phone quietly out onto the deck so no one would see my face. The sky was dark now, the stars faint against the glow from the shoreline. The air smelled like salt and something sweet from one of the houses down there. Beach. I sat on a lounge chair and finally pressed play. The first message started with silence. A long breath. Then my name, spoken in that familiar, clipped way. "Marissa, call me back." His voice was tight. "Where are you? Call me." The second message sounded different, sharper. "I just saw some pictures. What is going on? Why is the rest of the family down there with you? Why were we not told about this?" My hand tightened around the phone. The third message made my throat burn. "Do you have any idea how this looks? People are asking us at church what it is going on. They think we kicked you out. I will not have folks thinking this family is falling apart. Call me. Now." I listened, one after another. His voice moved from confusion to anger, like a needle swinging hard on a gauge. There was never a moment where he said, "Are you all right?" or "I miss you," or "I would like to understand." It was all about appearance, about how he and Mom looked sitting up there in that white clapboard church, without their younger daughter in the pew. In one message, I could hear Mom in the background, her voice high and tight. "Tell her she needs to come home," she said. "Tell her we have always done Christmas here." In another voicemail, he lowered his voice, as if someone might overhear, even through the phone. "Everybody saw that post," he said. "The one with the caption about family. You know exactly what you are doing." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the cushion. Ellie had not meant anything by the caption. She had just written what she felt at the moment. Holiday with family. She had no idea how it would read to the people who had spent years deciding, who counted as family and who did not. I let the last message play. This one was shorter. "If you do not pick up this phone by tonight," he said, "do not expect us to pretend this never happened." The voicemail clicked off. The ocean filled the silence. I realized my shoulders were up around my ears. I let them drop. Behind me, inside the glass, I could see Grace and Valerie moving around the kitchen, stacking plates. Ellie leaned against the island, scrolling on her phone, her face lit up by the screen. My people. The ones who had come with no guarantees, except that they wanted to be here, with me. The phone buzzed again in my hand. A text this time. From Mom. "We need to talk," she had written. "Everyone up here is asking questions. You put us in a terrible position." I read it twice. Not one word about how I felt. Not one word about the years I had sat at their table trying to make myself small enough not to be a burden. Something in me steadied instead of crumbling. I typed back slowly. "I will talk when I am ready. Not tonight." The little dots appeared like she was typing a reply. Then they disappeared. Nothing else came through. I sat out there a long time, listening to the waves and the muffled clink of dishes, feeling anger and sadness and a strange lightness swirling together. For the first time in my life, I was not sprinting to smooth things over. I was not the one calling back over and over, desperate to fix something I had not broken. At some point, the sliding door opened quietly behind me. Valerie stepped onto the deck, her cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. She sat down on the chair beside mine with a small sigh. "You out here hiding too?" she asked gently. Just getting some air, I said. She tilted her head, studying my face. Her eyes were soft, but sharp, had that look of someone who had seen more than people realize. We heard the phone buzzing all evening, she said. You do not have to tell me anything, but I am here if you want to. I hesitated. Then I handed her the phone, already pulled up with the call log. Dad's name fills the screen like a repeating echo. She let out a low breath. He saw the pictures then, she said quietly. Looks like it, I answered. There was a long pause. We could hear the ocean breathing in and out. People up there are talking, she said at last. Your mom called me earlier before we headed to the airport. She sounded rattled. She said folks at church have been whispering that something must have happened for you to be in Florida without them and for us to be here with you. I looked out into the dark. So it is about what other people think. As usual. Partly, she admitted. Some of it is pride. Some of it is fear. That town has a neat story. They do not know what to do when the picture gets cracked. We sat in silence for another moment. I could feel her turning something over in her mind. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Lower. Steadier. Marissa, there is something else, she said. Your dad did not just call your mom and leave you those messages. I turned my head to look at her. The porch light threw a soft glow on her face. She looked suddenly older than she had that afternoon when she came through me, front door with her suitcase and that big excited smile. He called me too, she said, just before dinner. And you should probably know what he asked me for. My fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. The porch light slid a soft yellow wash across her face, but her eyes looked darker than usual. What did he want? I asked, even though part of me already knew. Valerie rubbed her thumb over the edge of her sleeve, like she was trying to erase something that would not go away. He wanted your address, she said. He said he needed to see you in person. The words settled between us like a stone dropped in still water. For a second, all I could hear was the ocean, the long pull of the tide against the sand. When? I asked. Early afternoon, she answered. Right after lunch. We were finishing up some last-minute packing. He sounded unsettled, but calm. Too calm. He said he owed you an apology. He said he did not want to argue on the phone. He told me he wanted to come down and surprise you and make things right. She swallowed and looked at me with the guilty eyes of someone who has done a small wrong for what they believed was a big right. I believed him, she added. I thought this was the miracle people talk about at Christmas. I did not know he had already left you all those messages. A low ache spread through my chest. Some mix of fear, old habits, and something like disappointment. So you gave it to him, I said. She nodded. I did. I gave him the street and the house number. He asked what airport he should fly into. I told him about Tampa. He said he would check flights as soon as we hung up. The practical part of my brain kicked in before the emotional part could. Swallow me whole. Bangor to Boston. Boston to Tampa, or maybe Burlington to New York and then down. Holiday travel, full flights, delays, missed connections, whatever he was feeling. It still had to pass through airport security and airline schedules. So he might be trying to get here, I said slowly, but he is not here yet. It will take him at least until tomorrow. Valerie let out a breath that had been caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. That is what I am thinking, she said. It is not like he can jump on a bus and end up on your doorstep in 2 hours. It will take time. I just did not want you walking into the kitchen tomorrow and finding him, standing there, without warning. I looked out over the dark line of the water. The horizon was barely visible, just a thin difference between deep blue and black. Somewhere out there, the world I had left behind was spinning in its familiar, cold orbit, trying to pull me back in. Thank you for telling me, I said. I know you were only trying to help. She reached across and squeezed my hand. I wanted this Christmas to heal something, she said, not tear it open wider. The sliding door whispered open behind us. I turned to see Caleb step onto the deck. The light from the kitchen framed him for a moment, before the softer glow of the porch light took over. He looked at our faces, and his expression shifted from casual to concerned an instant. Everything all right? He asked. I tried to answer, but the words tangled somewhere in my throat. Valerie spoke instead. "Your dad called me earlier," she said to him, as if he were part of this family council too. "He is looking for her. He is trying to get here." Caleb glanced at me, then back at her. "Tonight?" he asked. Valerie shook her head. "Not likely." "He only started looking at flights this afternoon. You know how travel is this time of year. If he gets anything at all, it will probably be tomorrow." Caleb moved closer and leaned on the railing beside me. His voice dropped just enough that I knew he was speaking to me, not just into the air. "So we have time," he said. "That is something. You are not going to open that door and find him standing there tonight. You get to decide how to use these hours before he shows up." I let my shoulders sag a little, the tension leaking out just enough to breathe. The idea of him being on his way made my stomach churn, but the thought of him appearing out of nowhere with no warning had been worse. Inside the house, light and sound spilled through the glass. Ellie's laughter rose above the clink of pans. Mina was saying something dramatic in her southern drawl. Grace was humming what sounded like an old hymn while she wrapped leftovers. The life happening in that house felt real and warm and completely separate from the storm forming hundreds of miles away. "I should go back in," I said quietly. "They do not need to spend this whole night feeling my anxiety." Valerie gave me a soft look with sympathy. "You do not have to pretend everything is fine," she said. "Not with us." "I know," I answered. "But I also know that this is the first Christmas that has ever felt like it, belonged to me. I would like to live in it for one evening, before it turns into something else." She sighed, then nodded. "Fair enough," she said. "We will deal with tomorrow when it comes." She gave my arm one more squeeze and went back inside. Caleb stayed beside me for another moment, both of us watching the dark water. "You want me nearby when he arrives?" he asked. I thought about it. The kid version of me wanted to say I would handle it alone. The grown woman I was trying to be knew better. "Yes," I said, "but I may want to talk to him first. Just me. I am not sure yet." He nodded. "I will be around. You say the word." We went back into the villa together. The warmth and light wrapped around me as soon as the door slid shut. For a little while, it almost swallowed the chill that had settled under my skin. The rest of the evening passed in small, ordinary moments that felt precious precisely because I knew how fragile they were. Valerie finished her pie and insisted everyone have a slice. Grace told a story about the first Christmas she and Harold spent in a tiny apartment with a second-hand tree. Elle propped her phone against a candle and made all of us squish together on the couch for a group picture. My face hurt from smiling, but for once it was not the brittle smile I wore at my parents' dining table. It was something softer, truer. Much later, after the dishwasher hummed in the background and most of the house had gone, quiet, I found myself alone in the kitchen. The counters were mostly cleared, a single strand of garland reflected in the dark window over the sink. I picked up my phone from where I had left it near the coffee maker. The screen lit up my hand. There was a new text from an unfamiliar number. No name, just the digits of a Vermont area code I knew too well. I tapped it open. It was from Dad. The words were short. He wrote that he had found a flight. He wrote that he would land in Tampa late the next afternoon. He wrote that he wanted to talk and that he would come to the house whether I answered him or not. I stared at those lines until they blurred. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I did not write back. Instead, I set the phone down, screen facing the counter, and turned off the kitchen light. The house fell into a softer darkness, lit only by the tree in the corner of the living room and a nightlight in the hallway. As I walked toward my bedroom, the floor cool under my bare feet, I could feel the weight of the coming day settling around me. Not as a crushing thing, but as something heavy I would have to pick up and carry. In my room, I closed the door gently and sat on the edge of the bed. The sound of the ocean filtered through the window like a steady breath. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like a child bracing for a storm. I felt like a woman who had chosen this house, these people, this life. Tomorrow, my dad will walk into it. And for once, he would be the one on unfamiliar ground. I woke up before the sun even thought about rising, long before anyone else in the house started moving. The air still held that early morning chill, the kind that slipped under the door frames no matter how warm the rest of them villa was. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me, waiting for my heartbeat to settle into something steady. But it never did. Dad was on his way. Not in the abstract way he had been for years, floating somewhere on the edge of my life. He was physically coming, flying into Tampa sometime late tonight. The thought pressed against my ribs like something trying to break out. I finally sat up, pushed my hair back, and forced myself out of bed. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the distance. It felt like I had slipped into the house before it fully woke. Like I had a moment alone with the bones of it before the day began. By the time I walked into the kitchen, Grace was already there, stirring something in a heavy blue pot. The smell of cinnamon and apples drifted toward me. "Good morning, honey," she said without turning around. "You are up early. Everything is all right." I did not want to lie to her, not after everything she had opened up about last night. "I barely slept," I said. "My dad texted just before midnight." She sighed softly. The kind of sigh someone makes when they understand something too well. "He is really coming then?" I nodded. "Late tonight. If the flight does not get delayed, or canceled, or rerouted, holiday travel is a mess." Grace turned off the stove and slid the pot to the back burner. "Want some breakfast, or do you need coffee first?" "Coffee," I said. "Definitely coffee." While she reached for the mug, I walked to the window and watched the faintest pink begin to stretch across the water. It was peaceful in the way early mornings are peaceful, but inside me, everything churned like the ocean beneath a storm. One by one, the rest of the house woke up. Valerie came into the kitchen in her pale green robe, offering a small, apologetic smile. Nina shuffled in wearing one of Ellie's ridiculously oversized sweatshirts. Ellie, bright-eyed as always, announced she had slept wonderfully. And did anyone want pancakes? Nobody asked about my dad in front of the others. They were careful with me, like they understood that naming the thing too early might crack me right down. The center. By mid-morning, the villa was alive again. Music played low through the speakers. The smell of fried bacon drifted from the stove. Someone opened the sliding doors to let in the warm air, and the sound of the waves folded into the noise of breakfast chatter. For a little while, I let myself feel normal. We spent the early afternoon walking along the shoreline. The water was warm around our ankles, and the sand clung to our feet. Valerie talked about a book she had just read. Mina pointed out every seashell that looked vaguely heart-shaped. Ellie collected driftwood for a makeshift centerpiece she said she would build later. It almost felt like the kind of Christmas I had dreamed of when I was younger, the kind I thought would save us somehow. But every few minutes, the same thought pulled through me like a thread. Tonight, sometime tonight, Dad will land in Tampa. We ate an early dinner outside, while the sky shifted from blue to gold. The breeze softened, and the whole world seemed to tilt into something gentle. For a moment, I could pretend nothing was coming. That tomorrow would look just like today. That the people at this table were the only family that mattered. But when the sun dipped behind the water, I felt it again. The tightening in my stomach. The familiar ache of anticipation, mixed with dread. The same feeling I used to get sitting in the backseat of the car on the long drive home from school events, knowing Dad had barely looked at me the whole night. Around 8 in the evening, Caleb stepped out onto the deck to check his phone. When he came back in, he found me alone in the kitchen rinsing dishes. "Everything good?" I asked. He shook his head once. Then he held up his phone. His flight landed early. 10:47 in the evening. That is less than 3 hours from now. 3 hours. My hands stilled under the running water. I nodded slowly. "That is sooner than I expected." Caleb stepped closer. "You do not have to meet him alone," he said. "Say the word, and I will stand right beside you. Or you do not have to meet him at all. You can stay in your room. You can leave the house. You can take a walk on the beach until he goes away." I set the plate on the rack and turned off the faucet. "No," I said quietly. "I am not disappearing this time. He wants to talk? I will talk. But I will do it on my terms, not his." Caleb studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I will be within earshot, just in case." I appreciated that more than I could say. The next hour crawled by. Every car that passed outside made my pulse jump. Every set of footsteps coming down the hallway made my breath catch. Valerie set out more candles, even though we did not need them. Grace kept wiping the same counter. Nina called her sister twice. Ellie paced the living room, with a throw blanket wrapped around her shoulders, like she was waiting for some cosmic announcement. No one asked me if I was sure about any of this. They had seen enough of my story to know I had made my choice. At 9:30, I finally went to my room to change into something comfortable but presentable. A soft blue sweater, clean jeans, my hair pulled back loosely. I did not want to look fragile. But I did not want to look armored either. I just wanted to look like myself. At 10:10, my phone buzzed. A single line. Landed. No other words. I stared at it for a long second. Then I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked out to the main room. The lamps cast a warm glow on the walls. My guests sat scattered across the couches and chairs, quiet now, watching me the way people watch a tide pulling out too far. "He is here," I said. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, slowly, I walked toward the front door and pressed my palm against the cool metal handle. I took one long breath, then another, and I opened it. The night air rushed in, but he was not there yet. The driveway was empty, just a quiet street, a warm breeze, a moment that held its breath with me. I stepped out onto the top of the steps and waited, knowing that somewhere in the dark, his rental car was making its way down this quiet Florida road, carrying all the years we had never talked about, all the pain that never had a place to go, all the words he thought he would finally say when he reached me. I stood there, bracing myself, while the warm wind lifted my hair and the sound of the ocean rose behind me. He was close, closer than he had been in a long time, and the next few minutes were about to change everything. I stayed there, watching the road, waiting for headlights to appear. Headlights finally appeared at the far end of the road, a slow approach, steady and unhurried, like the driver was trying to gather himself before reaching the house. I stood at the top of the steps with my hands resting lightly on the rail, willing my breath to stay even. Behind me, the villa glowed with soft light, the hush of my guests pressing gently against the silence outside. No one came to the door. They were giving me space, but I could feel their presence like a quiet net, ready to catch me if I faltered. The car turned into my driveway and rolled to a stop. The engine went still. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver door cracked open and my dad stepped out. He looked older than the last time I had seen him. The Florida night air pushed his jacket back a little as he stood there, trying to find the words that had probably rehearsed themselves the entire day. Flight. He raised his eyes to me, not angry, not triumphant, not even defensive, just tired and unsure in a way I had never seen before. "Marissa," he said softly. His voice traveled the short distance between us and settled right under my ribs. I walked down one step, then another, until we were only a few feet apart. "I got your messages," I said. "All of them." He winced at that. "I figured you might. I was afraid you would not pick up if I tried again." "I did not pick up," I said. My voice stayed level. I was not ready to talk. He nodded like he deserved that. Maybe he did. A breeze lifted from the ocean and passed between us. The sound of the waves rose and fell like a slow heartbeat. He cleared his throat. "I saw the pictures. All of them. You looked happy. Everyone looked happy. Happier than I have seen in a long time." "You were not supposed to see them," I said. "Not that soon." He let out a long breath. "People were talking about it back home. Church folks. Neighbors. Your sister saw them first. She called your mom. Your mom called me. Then everyone called everyone. And all I could think was that you were down here building something good, and I had not been invited into any part of it." He paused, just for a blink, then added, "I think it hurt my pride more than anything." There it was. The truth he had always dressed up as concern or tradition or order. Pride. I crossed my arms, but not out of anger, more out of an old habit of self-protection. "You told me this year was for real families only. That is what you texted." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were glassy in the porch light. "I said that without thinking, without considering how it would sound to you. I have been doing that for a long time. Talking first, thinking second. You deserved better." I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of clarity. "You knew I would fly home," I said. "You knew I always did. You knew I would make the trip, even if the roads were bad or the airports packed. And you still sent that message." He rubbed the back of his neck like the weight of years had gathered there. "I thought you had your own life now. Big job, big success. You always seemed far away. Like you did not need us anymore. Like Catherine and the boys needed us more." There was that familiar sting. The old hierarchy. The old order. "I do have my own life," I said. "I have been building it for a long time. Without much from you. But needing people is not the same as needing approval." He looked down at the gravel under his feet. For a long moment, he did not move. Then he said, "I am sorry, Marissa, truly. I know I hurt you. Not just this year, for years. Maybe for most of your life. I do not know how to undo any of that. But I came here because I needed you to hear it from me in person." His voice cracked just a fraction. "I am sorry." The silence that followed was not cold. It was just full. Full of things we had never said. Full of years I had spent trying to guess at his love instead of hearing it, plainly. I glanced toward the villa. In the window, I saw a faint movement. Grace pulled a curtain just enough to check on me. Ellie passed by with a mug in her hands. Caleb leaning against the doorframe, watchful but letting me handle it. They were my people, my chosen circle, the ones who showed up because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. Dad followed my gaze and his eyebrows lifted slightly. "Looks like you have a full house," he said. "I do," I answered simply. He nodded. "They seem to care about you." "They do." He looked back at me, and for the first time in my life, he seemed to be standing on the outside of my life instead of at the center of it. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. I exhaled slowly. I felt the truth settle inside me like a steady stone. "Not tonight," I said. His shoulders tensed. Then he nodded once, accepting the boundary even if he did not like it. "I came a long way," he said. I did not expect to hear no. "I had to say it," I replied. "For me." He pressed his lips together and looked at the ground again. The porch light glinted off his glasses. When he looked back up, something like understanding flickered across his face. "I see that, and I respect it." My chest tightened. I had waited decades to hear that tone. Not control, not disappointment, something closer to recognition. "You can find a hotel in town," I said quietly. "Tampa has plenty, even on holidays. We can talk tomorrow morning if you still want to." He nodded again, slower this time, like he was learning how to move in a new world. "I will do that. I just needed to know you were willing to talk," I heard myself say. "I am willing. But on my terms, Dad." He swallowed and nodded. "On your terms." He stepped back toward the car, opened the door, then paused. "Merry Christmas, Marissa," he said. I let a long breath out. "Merry Christmas, Dad." He got in the car and drove away, the taillights disappearing down the quiet Florida road. I watched until the darkness swallowed them completely. Only then did I turn back toward the warm glow of the villa. Inside, the house was waiting. My people were waiting. My life was waiting. But before I could walk back through that door, the sound of a phone buzzing against wood reached me from inside. A second later, I heard Valerie call my name. Not in panic, but with urgency. I stepped forward, my breath catching, known that whatever message had just come in would tilt tomorrow into a whole new direction. Valerie was standing near the coffee table when I stepped back inside, her phone in her hand, her face a little paler than it had been on the deck. The others had gone quiet in that particular way people do when they know. Something is happening, but are trying not to crowd it. She lifted her eyes to me. "This one is for you," she said softly. "From Shannon." My stomach tightened. I took the phone. The text was short, but felt like it ran a mile long through my chest. Is it true Dad told you only real family this year? Everybody at church is. Talking. The pastor asked what happened. Mom cried in the parking lot. People think we cut you off. Another message followed almost on top of it. I did not know he sent that text. I only found out when the photos showed up. Dad is losing it trying to control the story. I let out a slow breath. There it was. Karma. Small and sharp. For years, he had shaped the story of who I was in that town. Now another story had slipped out without his permission, carrying on a simple picture of a girl standing with the people who loved her on a beach in Florida. I handed the phone back to Valerie. Thank you, I said. I will answer her tomorrow. You do not have to do any of this tonight, she said. Eat something. Sit with your people. Let his choices sit with him for a while. So that is what I did. We did not pretend everything was normal, but we also did not let his arrival swallow the night. Caleb poured coffee for whoever wanted it. Mina put on a silly holiday movie and muted it, leaving it to flicker in the background like a moving painting. Ellie stretched across the floor with a blanket and told a long story about a disastrous camping trip that had us all laughing in spite of ourselves. At some point, the knot in my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe without thinking about it. Eventually, the house grew quiet, one door closing after another as my guests went to bed. In my own room, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the waves and the faint hum of the air conditioner. I thought about all the years I would have done anything for my dad to show up, like this. To cross a state line just to see me, to say he was sorry. Then I thought about the way he had asked me to fix the story for him, to stand in that Vermont church as proof that everything was fine. I realized that sometimes the thing you have begged for all your life finally appears. And by the time it does, you have outgrown the version of yourself that would have grabbed it at any cost. At some point I slept. When I woke, the light was soft and gray, the house still quiet. I dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, tied my hair back, and made coffee before anyone else came into the kitchen. Around 9 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the counter, a new message from an unfamiliar number. But I knew who it was. I am at a diner up the road, it said. Your aunt told me the name last night. Can we talk this morning? I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back. You can come by at 10. We can sit on the back patio. I hit send before I could change my mind. When I told Valerie and Caleb, they did not argue. They just rearranged the morning around me. Grace took Ellie for a walk on the sand. Nina and Dennis volunteered to run to the little store for more ice and fruit. By 10, the house felt empty enough that I knew nobody would wander outside and stumble into something they could not unhear. I set 2 mugs on the patio table and sat with my back to the ocean, the sound of the waves at my shoulders like a hand of support. The sky was a pale, clear blue. The air smelled like salt and sun-warmed wood. At 10:15, I heard the knock at the front door. A minute later, Dad stepped out through the sliding glass door, looking smaller somehow in daylight. He glanced at the ocean, then at the chairs, then at me. Mind if I sit? He asked. I nodded toward the chair across from me. He lowered himself into it and wrapped his hands around the mug like he needed its warmth more than I did. He cleared his throat. I stayed quiet, letting the silence do some of the work. The church was rough yesterday, he said finally. Felix had all kinds of ideas about where you were and why the family was here, without you. Somebody showed your mom that picture your cousin posted, the one with the caption about family. He said the word like it was foreign. Heavy. I heard, I said. Valerie showed me Shannon messages. His jaw tightened at the mention of my sister, then loosened again. The pastor pulled us aside after the service, he said. Asked if you were all right. Asked if we had said or done something that made you feel like you did not belong. Your mom cried. I did not have a good answer. He looked at me then. Really looked, like he was trying to see more than whatever version of me he had carried in, his mind, for decades. You have any idea what it feels like to be pulled aside like that? He asked quietly. To have people looking at you like you have failed at the one thing you were supposed to do right. I almost laughed. The sound came out as a rough breath instead. I know exactly what it feels like, I said. I spent most of my childhood feeling like I had failed at being the kind of daughter you wanted. He winced as if I had reached across and struck him. I did not come all this way to fight, he said. I came because I cannot stand the thought of people thinking I do not love my own child. I leaned forward. For maybe the first time in my life, my voice came out steadier than his. Do you love me? I asked. Me, not the idea of me. Not the me who fits into your Christmas card picture. The real daughter sitting in front of you, who left home to build a life. You, never asked about. His eyes glistened. Of course I do, he said. I have always loved you. I just did not know what to do with you. You were different. Shannon was easy. You were not. A sad kind of clarity moved through me. You are right, I said. I am different. I always have been, and I spent years thinking that if I accomplished enough, earned enough, gave enough, you might see me the way you saw her. He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. When I sent that text about real family, he said, I was thinking about the noise, the kids, the way your mom gets overwhelmed. I did not think about the words. I did not think about how they would hit that little girl you used to be. I thought you would shrug it off, make your own plans, come at Easter instead. I did not think you would invite everyone else here. He shook his head once. But seeing those pictures showed me something, he added. You did not just make other plans. You made something beautiful without us. The ocean roared behind me, a soft, steady applause. He looked out toward the water. They are all talking back home, he said, but not like I expected. A couple of women from church told your mom they were proud of you, said they wished they had been as brave when they were younger. My old fishing buddy asked why he had never heard about your company, about this house. He looked at me like I had been asleep for 20 years. That was his consequence, I realized. Not some dramatic public shaming, just a slow unraveling of the image he had curated, thread by thread, as people realized he had left parts of his own story out. He took a breath. I asked you last night to come home and stand beside us, he said, to make it look like everything was fine. That was wrong. That was for me, not for you. I see that now. I did not say anything. I just waited. He forced himself to meet my eyes. So I am not going to ask you to do that, he said. I am only going to ask one thing. If there is a way for us to have something different from here on out, I want that. Even if it is smaller than what I thought it would look like. Smaller. Honest. Imperfect. The words slid into place inside me. This is what I can offer, I said. I can stay in touch. I can call on holidays. I can visit if I feel respected. But I am not going to pretend anymore. I am not going to stand in a church just to fix a story for you. And if you ever send me a message like that again, you will not hear from me for a long time. He flinched, then nodded. I also want you to hear this, I added. You cannot threaten to cut me off. You already did that when you decided I did not count as real family this year. You cannot disown someone you never fully claimed. We sat with that for a long moment. He swallowed hard. The muscles in his jaw worked like he was chewing on every word. Finally, he stood. I should let you get back to your guests, he said. I got a room near the airport. I will fly out tonight. He looked around the patio once more, at the view of the water, at the chairs, waiting for people who had chosen me, with no conditions. You did good, he said, almost to himself, with this place, with those people. Thank you, I answered. I did it without you. He nodded once, accepting that as fact rather than accusation. Then he walked back through the house, offered a brief hello and goodbye to whoever crossed his path, and left. I watched him go down the steps and along the side of the house. I stood there until the sound of his rental car faded down the road, and the only thing I could hear again was the ocean and the distant laughter from the living room. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new message from Shannon. David told me what you said, she wrote. I know it is not my place, but I am glad you finally did. I am sorry for the part I played. I used to feel special being the favorite. Now I just feel small. If you ever want a sister relationship that is not built on that old mess, I am willing to try. Another from Mom arrived that evening. I saw the photos from Florida again, she wrote. Grace sent me some. You look happy. I hope someday I am brave enough to sit at that table with you. I am sorry for the ways I failed you. I am not ready to say it out loud yet in front of everyone, but I can say it here. Old me would have rushed to answer right away, smoothing and patching and reassuring. This version of me took a walk on the sand first, let the tide roll in and out around my ankles while the sky turned pink and orange overhead. I watched Valerie and Ellie collect shells down the beach. I saw Caleb skipping rocks with Harold. I heard Nina telling Dennis a wild story in that rolling accent. My life here, now, is full. Then I sat on a driftwood log and typed slowly. To Shannon, I wrote that I was willing to see what a new kind of sisterhood could look like. One conversation at a time. To Mom, I wrote that I heard her, that her words mattered, and that I would be open to talking more when she was ready to do it without pretending. The next day, my guests started to leave, one car service at a time. There were long hugs at the door, promises to come back next year, leftover containers pressed into hands for the flights home. Grace kissed my cheek and told me to always keep extra butter in the fridge. Nina made me swear we would turn this into a tradition. Valerie held me the longest and whispered that she was proud of me in a way that had nothing to do with job titles or houses. After the last suitcase went into the trunk and the final car pulled away, the villa fell quiet again. But it was a different quiet than the one I had known before. This one was full of echoes. Laughter in the walls, footsteps in the hall, the memory of a table where everyone had a seat. That night I sat on the deck with a blanket around my shoulders and watched. The moon lay a silver path across the water. My phone rested beside me, screen dark. For once, I did not feel the urge to check who might be calling or what crisis might be waiting. I thought about that first text from my dad. This year, it was just a real family. I thought about the 42 calls he had thrown into the void when he realized he could not control the story anymore. I thought about the quiet way I had finally told him no, and watched the old, dynamic crack right down the middle. People think revenge has to be loud, slamming doors, shouting matches, public scenes. But sitting there with the night wrapped around me and the ocean breathing steadily at my back, I realized my revenge had been much quieter than that. I built a life that did not need his approval. I chose people who chose me back. I stopped performing. I let his words sit with him instead of rushing to pull them out of his hands. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is say nothing and keep living well. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.